So it is of course no secret that a big reason why people are relocating to Dubai and the UAE is the tax benefits. The UAE still has 0% personal income tax, and for most businesses it actually also still has 0% corporate tax as well. And that is because while they do have a 9% corporate tax, that 9% corporate tax only applies for businesses that are not classed as small businesses, and the official threshold is around $816,000 a year. So if you make below that in revenue, you can not only pay 0% personal tax, but also 0% corporate tax. But there's a lot of people who might really want to have these tax benefits, but they don't necessarily want to live in the UAE, which is why there are a lot of agencies and a lot of service providers who offer you the service of getting residency in the UAE, which actually only requires you to spend 2 days of the year in the UAE to maintain that residency. And with that residency, what these people are telling you is that if you just maintain the residency by spending at least 2 days in the UAE, you can get 0% tax in the UAE without actually living in the country, and you can go out and live in whatever country you want or travel the whole year or whatever you want to do while paying 0% tax. But the question is this actually possible? Because it is true that in order to maintain your residence visa in the UAE, you actually only need to spend 2 days of the year in the country, more specifically at least 1 day every 6 months. So does this mean that it is actually possible to pay 0% tax with a UAE tax residency by only spending 2 days of the year in the country? That is what I wanted to talk about in this video, because if you get this wrong, it can really be bad for you. On this channel, if you know me, you know that I will always tell you the truth. I will always tell you the actual reality, and I've actually read the law, so I actually understand the law. I'm not just some guy who's like talking out of my ass like a lot of people, and I'm gonna tell you the truth, even if that truth would mean that you use less of my services. So I promote a service that helps people get residency in the UAE. It's a company called GenZone, by far the best company in the market. And I'm not just saying that because I'm biased, it's because I use them myself. Whenever I have any issues, I talk to them, and they genuinely provide the best service in the market, because there's so many people, so many service providers that provide a bad service. So given that I am affiliated with a service provider like this, it would make sense for me to tell you that yes, you can just set up a company here, get a residence visa, and you only have to spend 2 days a year and you can pay 0% tax. It would be beneficial for me to tell you this, because it would make me more money, because more people would use these services if they thought that yes, I only have to spend 2 days. And a lot of people who don't actually want to live in the UAE, which by the way, a lot of people actually do want to live here. They might not think that in the beginning, but then they come here, they actually end up staying. But nevertheless, there are a lot of people who might want these tax benefits but don't want to live. We would actually get a lot more business if this was the case. But despite of this, what I am going to tell you is that the truth is that no, you cannot just spend 2 days in the UAE and pay 0% tax. And I'm not going to break down why that is, because while on the surface, like I mentioned, it is true that to maintain your residency, you only need to spend 2 days. So why does that mean that it is not actually enough for you to pay 0% tax? Well, there's several problems with this actually. And the first is that the key distinction that we need to make here is between residency and tax residency. So residency, which does require these 2 days a year or 1 day every 180 days, refers to maintaining your residency. So residency means the right to live in the UAE. It's your residence permit that allows you to live here if you want to. So essentially it gives you the right but not the obligation to live in the United Arab Emirates. Tax residency is a whole separate concept. Almost everyone gets this wrong. This is not very well understood. Tax residency has pretty much nothing to do with residency. It is an entirely separate concept that defines when a country deems you to be tax resident in that country. Essentially, where the country deems that you live in this country based on actual facts, and therefore you should pay taxes in this country. Now, in most countries, you actually wouldn't want to be tax resident there, because that means you have to pay taxes. But in the UAE, because there are no taxes, a lot of people do want to be tax residents there, because usually you want to have a tax residence somewhere, and the UAE is just a great place to have that, obviously, because you do not have any taxes. But the problem is that the conditions for tax residency are very different from the conditions for residency. In fact, to be a tax resident in the UAE, you need to spend at least 90 days in the country if you run a business here or if you have a job here or something like that. So that debunks the myth that you can pay 0% tax by only spending 2 days of the year in the UAE. It is simply not true. And again, I'm telling you this despite of the fact that this will mean that less people will want to use the services that I promote for Dubai setup services. I could be like a lot of the dishonest service providers out there who sort of gloss over this, or they'll be like, yeah, it's fine, you can do this, because they just want you to buy. This is what a lot of service providers in Dubai and the people who promote them will do. I'm not going to do that. I'm always going to tell you the truth, and this is the truth. But the problems with this statement don't even end here, because the thing is, even if you become a tax resident in the UAE, so even if you do spend 90 days, you're like, okay, 90 days is fine, I can spend 90 days. It still doesn't necessarily mean that you get to pay 0% tax. Why is that? Well, because there is no law in the world that says that you cannot be tax resident in multiple countries at the same time. The UAE might deem you a tax resident, but then if you go and live 9 months of the year in Canada or in Australia or in whatever country, that country is also most likely going to deem you a tax resident, and they are also going to tax you. So it doesn't matter if UAE is charging you 0, if Canada is then also charging you 50%. You still have to pay the 50% to Canada, and because there is no tax in the UAE, there's no tax to like deduct from this. So you have to pay these full taxes. So in order to actually pay 0% tax in the UAE or anywhere, you should actually focus much less on the conditions to be a tax resident, even less the conditions to be a resident, because that's not even relevant in the UAE. And you should focus a lot more on the conditions to be non-resident in the country where you are from or the countries where you spend time. So practically, what does this mean? If you're right now sitting in Canada or Australia or France and you're like, I want to pay less tax, it's much more important for you to look at the rules of your own country, for you to become non-resident in that country first. And then you can look at, okay, do I actually need a tax residence somewhere? In most cases you do, and in most cases you kind of want to have one place in the world where you have your main home and your main ties. And then you can look at the UAE as the easy option for you to move to that is not going to charge you any tax. And you can look at the conditions for what the UAE will use to determine you a tax resident in the UAE. So I hope that clarifies that myth. No, it is not possible to spend 2 days of the year in the UAE and pay 0% tax unless you are in a situation where you don't have a tax residence anywhere. There's not many cases like this where this works. And okay, the UAE is not giving you a tax resident, but neither is any other country. So technically you could, I guess, pay no tax. In most cases, you must spend at least 90 days in the country to get that tax residence in the UAE. And to spend that 90 days in the UAE, by the way, it is not enough for you to do that on a tourist visa. For the 90-day condition, you need to either have a business or a job or some kind of residence permit in the UAE. And if you want to get this residence permit, you want to get the help of someone who's always going to tell you the truth, who's always going to tell you the reality. Just like I told you in this video, you can book a free consultation with my team at GenZone, who have helped more than 800 people set up companies here, get residency here, get golden visas here, buy property, pretty much anything you want to do in the UAE. They're the go-to place for this. I cannot speak more highly of them, and you can speak with them again for free in that free consultation, ask any questions you have, and move forward if you are interested. So if you're interested in that, book that free consultation, and I will see you in the next video.